Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Five for Breakfast. We're now in our 12th episode of 2026. Our gold sponsor for Fiber Breakfast is Conducts. Last week we had record attendance at our second Regional Fiber Connect Workshop of the year in Indianapolis. It's a pleasure here from Indiana's Governor Mike Braun, who discussed in Indiana's broadband priorities, data center development, and economic impacts for the state. We also had Megan Miner, Indiana's brand new Chief Broadband Officer, who provided an update on what Indiana is doing with their NTIB program and where things are in progress. And we're now only 8 weeks away from our Fiber Broadband Association's annual Fiber Connect 2026 conference at the Gaylord Palms in Orlando from May 17th to 20th. And we are on pace for another record attendance this year. This will again be the largest fiber broadband event in the world, and you're not going to want to miss this. I'm super excited. It ends Wednesday with our AI Infrastructure Summit with Michio Kaku, my favorite quantum physicist, so you're not going to want to miss any of that. So if you haven't registered, please register, and we'll see you in Orlando, May 17th to 20th. So last week on Five for Breakfast, our guest was Brian Washburn. He's a chief analyst at Omnia. He discussed AI and network effect, where carriers win next. And Brian, he's been modeling and forecasting the impact of artificial intelligence on network traffic. And he shared with us his views on how ISPs can leverage this AI traffic data to find new opportunities for revenue growth. So if you missed last week's session, you can go to our website and watch the replay. Today on Five for Breakfast, our guest is Mike O'Day, the Senior Vice President and General Manager for Optical Communications at Corning, to discuss Tight Today, Transformational Tomorrow, a historical moment for fiber. Mike was appointed Senior Vice President and General Manager of the Optical Communications in September of 2024. In this role, Mike has end-to-end responsibilities for the Optical Communications Market Access Platform, including optical fiber and cable, optical connectivity solutions, and optical commercial operations. Prior to his current role, Mike served as Vice President of Corning's Optical Communications Technology and Program Management Office, leading the disruptive innovation programs and sequence adoption of those innovations by customers in support of Corning's growth strategy. Prior to Corning, Mike served as a field artillery officer in the U.S. Army, and he holds a Bachelor of Science from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point and a Master's of Business Administration from Minnesota State in Mankato. How do you say that, Mike?
Mankato, but close.
Mankato. Sorry about that, Mankato. Well, Mike, welcome. And for our audience, please type in your questions as go, and we'll work those in the discussion. So, Mike, it's just a great pleasure to have you on. I always enjoy talking to you, especially when you had your CTO role and now as the head of Optical. Why don't we start off with just kind of, you've been out in San Diego. What is going on in the fiber industry?
Yeah. Well, Gary, thanks for having me on again. It's been a year or two since my last time with you, and I would tell you, with regard to the industry, we are off and running, sprinting, I would say, into 2026 as I speak. I think for all of the entire optical industry, both supporting tremendous growth in the North America fiber to the home market, but also the generative AI demands that are also increasing significantly over the past couple of years. And this year, to boot, we're celebrating, Corning, celebrating our 175th birthday. And so we're excited about that, but frankly, more excited about what we're seeing in our industry right now at the moment. As you mentioned, I'm live from the OFC conference, one of the biggest fiber conferences of the year for our industry. And the theme is nothing short of excitement about what's happening as we support broadband and Gen AI in the country and around the world. I would maybe offer this. This is my 28th year at Corning, and reflecting back, starting in 1998, and we saw a big uptick in around the 2001 timeframe, and followed by some dark days in the industry, and then a rebound with fiber to the home picking up throughout the course of the past couple of decades, but I don't think I've actually ever seen anything like what we are experiencing right now in the industry. You have these two powerful, big secular trends of fiber to the home and Gen AI coming together at the same time in the industry. While tight in terms of supply, or tightening for sure, what we see is just this great opportunity for our industry. If you think about what's happening, more and more broadband gets deployed. With last year being a record, I think, as you reported, nearly 12 million homes connected with fiber, the biggest year ever, as we continue to get more people, more businesses connected with broadband connectivity. When that happens, then, as you might imagine, the more broadband connectivity that people have in their hands, then the more use of AI and AI use cases that get created. That then spawns a whole wave of investment around creating new applications using artificial intelligence, which then spawns a whole round of investment in AI infrastructure, fiber, cable, connectivity to connect all of these servers and GPUs together, and the cycle continues. And I think that's where we find ourselves right at the beginning of this cycle, where very complementary between broadband connectivity and AI that's happening. And we're right smack dab in the center of it happening. Maybe I'll end with this before we dive into some specific questions. But first low loss optical fiber invented and started to be deployed around 1970 by Corning. So that's been 56 years ago now since that happened. It took us, for Corning, 47 years to deploy the first 1 billion fiber kilometers from our factories. Not for the entire industry, but as a leader, it took about that long. It took us the next 8 years through 2025 to deliver the next billion kilometers of fiber and deploy those for applications all around the world. And so it's just interesting how fast things are changing. And I suspect that next billion will happen to us sooner than the 8-year mark that the second billion took. And so we're capacitizing. The industry is adding a lot of capacity to ensure that next billion of fiber kilometers gets deployed in just a few years ahead. So exciting times, to say the least.
Well, this decade, since COVID, has been the largest investment cycle in fiber in history, right? As everybody came out of COVID saying, okay, we have to be connected. We need to get everyone connected to broadband. And the industry, at the end of last year, had nearly 100,000 homes passed, first and second passing. So quite a bit of deployment. One of your customers, AT&T, doing 60 million, 64 million, depending on what the number is, homes passed. Right. And so you think it can't get any better. We're almost there. And then all of a sudden, this huge investment cycle in AI infrastructure. And so you guys announced, or at least Meta announced, a $6 billion deal with you guys. So not a small little deal for AI. And then we just saw a few weeks ago, AT&T, or I guess not even that long ago, $250 billion investment plan. Nokia is putting in, they're putting in $4 billion into AI-ready optical networks. We're seeing 1.6 terabyte transistors connecting GPUs and chips. And I mean, given your military experience as an artillery, what is the trajectory on this whole innovation phase here?
Yeah, well, I wish I had a crystal ball and that I could predict it. But I would tell you our trajectory and what we at least anticipate that we know this is a couple things that I would say we anchor on. One is getting broadband to the unserved and the underserved is a commitment not only by private money, private corporations, companies investing that, but it's also a mandate from the U.S. government that we're going to get everybody connected. And so there are many more homes that need to get connected to real broadband connectivity. And so I see a long trajectory in the broadband opportunity for all of us, both not only in the U.S. but all around the world. There's just still a tremendous amount of people that don't have real broadband connectivity. So that's part one. With regard to AI, all I would tell you is this: we speak to all of our customers, the hyperscalers deploying these massive AI data centers and big GPU clusters, and if we could make more, they would buy more, because the demand for AI services, whether that's you and I using it, for our own personal needs, but more importantly, companies, manufacturers, many companies, many industries finding and realizing use cases on how AI can enable more efficient ways to make things, sell things, service things, I think is here to stay. I don't think that's a short-term cycle, and therefore, our outlook is pretty bullish. That said, if you take the links of a network in the whether it's in a broadband network or a data center network, most of those links today are optical. They've converted since 1970 from long haul to submarine networks, connecting continents, to now getting fiber closer to in the access network to users, to the home, if you will. In a data center, they've been optical links inside the data center from connecting switch fabrics for many, many years. But there are still some copper links remaining. And when you talk about, bringing fiber continent to continent from submarine all the way down to the server level in a data center, that exists in the optical domain today, and it's growing. But what we haven't unlocked is getting fiber to the silicon, if you will, down to the chip. And that's the next wave of what I will say copper or electrical conversion to optical. And that's we're on the cusp of that. And so as we think about the trajectory for the need for passive optical connectivity and fiber and cable that makes that comprises these solutions that are needed, I think the future is really bright in the industry.
When you think about what's next, so as we move, so first of all, there's just a lot of fiber to the home. So, there's 130 million homes. We have about 88 million homes connected with fiber, 60 million homes left, but all these second and third and fourth passings. So there's about 130 more million homes that are going to have second and third passings. So a lot of fiber to the home left. But now when we're thinking about connecting all these hyperscalers and then connecting GPU racks inside the hyperscalers, you're looking at these cables, 6912, massive cables. Can you talk a little bit about the innovation with multi-core and hollow core and what that, and other things that you guys are looking at to really help reduce cable size and be able to reduce latency?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, speaking from the innovation perspective, we were onto this, we call it a technology vector maybe 4 or 5 years ago, around the vector being density. And whether you're building an outside plant network or a data center network, the need for more bandwidth in the form of more fibers in essentially a finite amount of space, whether that's a conduit or a duct or between poles or between racks in a data center, the space is still limited, but yet the need for more optical cores or optical fibers was growing. And thus, what the industry has done, what Corning has done over the last handful of years, is really innovate in a 55-year-old industry. The amount of innovation, particularly in optical fiber, has never been greater. And I would say 3 things about the innovations. One is taking a standard fiber, which is a 250 micron fiber that's been around for really 55 years and still is being deployed predominantly today, to make that fiber smaller, whether that's 200 micron or something even smaller. The optical properties don't change, and the familiarity with the ecosystem doesn't change in terms of using those fibers, are backwards compatible. And so there's a movement right now to smaller fibers, and smaller fibers therefore enable smaller cables, or similar sized cables with simply more fibers in them, is what's happening. That's number one. And that is a trend that's beginning, and we're right at the forefront of that. And I think you'll see a lot of new innovation and a lot of deployment, if you will, of smaller fibers, single mode fibers. Number one. Number two, you mentioned multi-core. Multi-core is another way to really focus on the density vector, and that gives you either 2 or 4 cores in a same 250 micron footprint, let's say. And so it's in essence a way of doubling or quadrupling the amount of bandwidth down in optical fiber. We're launching here at OFC this week a new multi-core solution, which isn't just the fiber, but you have to think about the fiber. Now you have 4 cores in a fiber. How do you splice that together? How does it plug into a transceiver? How do you cable it? And any differences in all of those aspects of really deploying the multi-core fiber, we're going to display this week at OFC. And I think you'll see multi-core start to become more deployable, if you will, in the months and the years ahead to really drive where more cores are needed. And that could be in an 1.5-inch conduit, or it could be between racks in a data center where the physical space needs more optical bandwidth. And then lastly, hollow core fiber, maybe a little further out beyond multi-core, but not so much on the density vector, but really focused on a critical aspect of latency and how fast data can be transmitted across the network, if you will. And so hollow core deployments, you're starting to see those trials, in fact, happening. The number of manufacturers of hollow core with press releases and the like. So a lot of work and research taking place on hollow core fiber to really extend the latency of optical fiber. So therefore you can connect perhaps a data center in Ohio to a data center in New York and not have typical latency that you might see in a single mode fiber, and get the benefit of connecting GPUs to create an even bigger AI cluster as an example of a use case for hollow core fiber.
So, I mean, just exciting times. And, as we just mentioned, 1.6 terabits. I mean, so this fiber is just faster and faster and faster. All right. So let's move into BEAD. All right. Mm-hmm. One of the things I hear from everybody is, there's one part of the market that says, hey, we have a lot of fiber, so even though we're going to start 56 states and territories all at once with BEAD, we should have plenty of BEAD compliant fiber, BABA compliant. And then others are saying, no, there's a fiber shortage, AI is taking it all. Can you start with the difference between drawing the glass and cabling glass, and kind of why that there's different vendors of cabling and glass have different perspectives?
Yeah, maybe it's a great question. Let me maybe provide context for the value chain and how the ecosystem actually takes place. And I'll start with this: there are fiber makers, cable makers, and then connectivity makers. All three. We happen to be one. Corning happens to participate in all three of those areas. Other OEMs may participate in one or two, and some participate in all three, like ourselves. But let's start with fiber. There are two real major processes in fiber making. One is the preform, or the making of the glass. There are 3 manufacturers of that in the U.S. And that is what constitutes country of origin U.S. and BABA compliant fiber has to have preforms made in the U.S. The second part of the fiber making process is the draw. So you take a big piece of glass and you draw it into a very thin piece of fiber, hundreds of kilometers of fiber out of that glass. And the draw making capability, also a critical part of the fiber making process, that also has to be in the U.S. to make a BABA compliant fiber. So the glass, called the preform, and the draw has to take place in the U.S. to make a BABA compliant fiber. Those fibers are then sold to cablers. In some cases, like Corning, we make the fiber, but we also make the cable. But there are others that don't make fiber, but do make cable. So fiber has to be then made and consumed by a cable maker in the U.S. to make a U.S. Compliant cable, if you will, BABA compliant cable, fiber optic cable. And those take the form of loose tube cables or ribbon cables or drop cables. All of those are used in the outside plant network at various parts of the network as we build out fiber to the home and broadband networks as well. And then lastly, ultimately need to put a connector on those fibers, and the connectors are typically made in many different places. We happen to make a lot of connectors, multi-fiber and single fiber connectors in the US, and then they're assembled in all parts of the world to make cable assemblies. But so that's how the ecosystem works. And so there are vendors in each of those categories. Some span all three, like ourselves, and others may participate in one or two of those particular pieces of the value chain.
And so when, can you tell us a little bit about, how can the market be assured that we'll have enough BABA compliant fiber for the BEAD program?
Yeah. Right at the heart of, I know what's at top of mind for many in our industry right now. So BABA compliant fiber specifically, there are, as I mentioned before, 3 vendors that make fiber in the U.S. And have to the tune of well over 100 million fiber kilometers of annual capacity of BABA compliant fiber today. Now, and that number isn't staying static. Companies like ourselves, and I believe the others, have announced or continually adding BABA compliant or U.S. made fiber, both the preform and the draw parts of the fiber making process. So that's part one. There's the point being that there is a lot of domestic U.S. manufacturing BABA compliant fiber that exists today. Secondly, when you look at BEAD specifically and the demands for BEAD, there are 4 million homes, of which maybe 2/3 of those will be passed with fiber, the rest with satellite or other technology. So it puts you in a category of 2 or 3 million homes that need BABA compliant fiber to support the BEAD program. That represents somewhere between 2 to 3% of the U.S. capacity in any given year of BABA compliant fiber. And so the point being, and sharing, that there is a lot more fiber, BABA compliant fiber, made in the U.S. Than there is demand for the BEAD program. And so I just want to give an assurance to the industry that there is ample fiber capacity. Now, there's competing demands for that capacity, make no mistake, whether that's large carriers deploying fiber to the home networks or large hyperscalers deploying big AI networks. However, what we have done, what Corning has done, we have invested nearly $1 billion of capacity in the last 5 years. And we are, as announced, with our Meta announcement, we've alluded to continued announcements of capacity expansions in North Carolina, where the largest fiber and cable facilities in the world exist today. And we're continuing to add capacity to support BEAD, as well as all of our other customers for all the other applications in the network. So that's what's happening. And I'd like to give the assurance, at Corning, our commitment stands true. We've made commitments to the U.S. government, to many of our customers that are relying on BEAD funds to get more homes deployed, that Corning is with you, supports you, and we will have the capacity in place to support when you need it, to support BEAD deployments with BABA compliant fiber. That's a commitment that I've made and Corning has made publicly, and to all of our deployers of BEAD deployments in the upcoming years ahead.
And I know you can't speak for the other suppliers, but it's my understanding that they're making similar priorities.
Yeah, in fact, I think imminently we're about to announce there will be a public announcement for the U.S. government, for all of the organizations, as well as the industry as a whole, that Corning, as well as 2 or 3 other suppliers, have come together to form a coalition that will ensure that cables with BABA compliant fiber are made available in prioritizing BEAD deployments beginning this year. And so if you think about not only Corning with a lot of our capacity, but other manufacturers of BABA compliant fiber will be making a public announcement to ensure that BEAD deployments are prioritized when the deployments actually occur. What we don't want to have is inventory buildup or hoarding of this fiber, because it's valuable to all of our customers. And so we're just going to ask the industry to make sure that we align with when deployments are really going to happen, and we will ensure that there is BABA compliant fiber and cable available for those deployments, whether that's Corning or some of the other industry participants.
So Mike, I mean, what is next? So, is quantum going to take off? I mean, so as we build out, all this fiber to the home, we're getting fiber everywhere. So that's going to improve our mobile networks. It's going to improve our smart grid modernization, our public safety, connect these communities, able to have these hyperscalers connected. What if you take your crystal ball? What's the next big thing for fiber? Couldn't there be anything bigger than this AI and broadband together?
Well, I would offer this. I think it's fun to think about, and I'll answer your question maybe eventually, but it's fun to think about. But right now, if you're a small rural operator out there, you want to hear and you want to know that companies like Corning and the other manufacturers have your back when BEAD funds ultimately start to roll out. And I just want to make one last shout out that the answer is an overwhelming yes. We are there for you, and we will. The industry will come together to ensure that your deployments to get more people that are not served yet with broadband connectivity connect. So once we have broadband at the fingertips of every American out there, and so they now have access to AI and numerous other applications to come. What does that generate? Well, I hope we come together as a collective to make the world a little bit better. Whether that is, quantum computing that will unleash all kinds of high bandwidth applications that could be game changing in the future. I don't know. Others opine on that often. All I know is that it won't happen without high bandwidth fiber optics to make that happen, requiring a lot of bandwidth. And so I think, our part in this ecosystem, our small part at Corning, is we just want to make sure that whatever applications do emerge, whether we have ideas on how to cure cancer through Gen AI, where we can find ways to accelerate drug discovery and treatments of critical processes like that, or critical to treat and try to find cures for critical diseases like that, like cancer. We want to be a part of that, and we want to ensure that we're not a bottleneck, but rather an enabler to making the world better through broadband connectivity for everybody, and that starts with an optical fiber. And so that's what we're acutely focused on, and I think there is so much opportunity as the world gets connected to make it just a better place, and so that's what we're focused on here.
Well, Mike, I always love that you're a technologist at heart, and you just love how cool this stuff is. And I really appreciate how you always make yourself so available. It's just a fun industry we're in. I really appreciate the support that Corning has to your leadership and Corning's support of the industry as we really work towards elevating the quality of life for generations to come. I really feel like something special is happening right now. Yeah, we feel the same, and I think that is our goal, right? We all aspire to work for a purpose as something higher than ourselves, and I think what we're doing is in fact enabling that for the world. So, and the feelings are mutual at Corning, Gary, with regard to Fiber Broadband Association and your steadfast advocacy, if you will, throughout the industry, and getting fiber pervasively deployed around the country and ultimately around the world, I think is all in the direction of goodness for all. And so thank you for what you do day in and day out. Well, Mike, thanks for joining us, and thank everybody for joining us. Look forward to getting back together next Wednesday. Our guest is Jeff Hainan from Deloro and Mark Trudeau of OpenVault. They're going to discuss OpenVault's fourth quarter report, particularly capacity, competition, cash flow, and the upstream equation. If you haven't looked at the OpenVault's fourth quarter data, it really is very revealing on the demand for more upstream capacity. So you're not going to want to miss that. Thanks again, Mike. Enjoy San Diego and look forward to seeing you in Charlotte soon.